Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Guard of Honor Parade formed up at third Series Advancement Lecture 2017 Parade formed up. 3 officers, 30 men on square. In attendance is UC Central Armed Forces Regimental Band. All drawn up from UC Central Armed Forces Cadet Corps. Ready for your inspection. Parade Commanding Officer, Squadron Leader Hadi Ibrahim reported, Your Excellency.
Land inspection over. May I have your permission to follow? Thank you, Your Excellency.
Yeah. Your Excellency, inspection over. May I have a permission to carry the rest of the parade? Thank you, sir. Raid! General salute! Present! Marching close of foot. Move to the right, 10.
distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to you all for taking time to participate in this afternoon's August function. To chair this afternoon's lecture, I have the honor and pleasure to invite a professor of science education who has served in many different capacities within Ghana and abroad, and who is currently the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, also known as the University of Competitive Choice. Please join me as I welcome Professor Joseph Gate Ampere, Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, to chair this afternoon's function.
Your Excellency, Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Alhaji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, Asabe Makwesiata, the Mahine of Ogwa Traditional Area, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Honorable Ministers of State, Honorable Members of Parliament, Nananom, Pro Vice Chancellor, University of Cape Coast, Registrar, our guest commentators, members of convocation, staff and students of UCC, distinguished invited guests, media partners, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I heartily welcome you all this afternoon to the University of Cape Coast and to the third advancement lecture series of the university, which allows dialogue to continue on respective subjects of topical importance with the aim to continuously add to our knowledge base while providing a platform for key issues to be explored and debated. As chairman for this afternoon's lecture, I am deeply honored to extend a special welcome to all of you for making time to participate in this lecture. Special appreciation to His Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, who, irrespective of his very heavy schedule, accepted to be our guest speaker for today's lecture. We are indeed very grateful. My warmest appreciation also goes to our commentators for this year's lecture. Nana Sambru Butler, a seasoned entrepreneur and the immediate past chairman of the University of Cape Coast Governing Council, and Professor Samuel K. Enim, Associate Professor of Economics and Director for Research, Innovation, and Consultancy at the University of Cape Coast. For many of you to make time to be here today tells us how important issues related to the African economy means to you. Undoubtedly, Africa, with her wealth of human and natural resources and extraordinary potential, still struggles with an ailing economy. The topic chosen for this year's lecture, Developing Stronger Economies for the African Continent, the Missing Link, is apt for the times we are in. There's evidence that Africa accounts for just a little over 2% of the world's total GDP, even though the continent is inhabited by 12% of the world's population. It is also quite disturbing, for instance, that the entire GDP of the sub-Saharan Africa, a significant chunk of Africa, is only just about the GDP of South Korea. Development theories have attempted to explain this reality, advancing arguments including the structure of the African economy, which is still essentially a colonial economy. Corruption, economic mismanagement, among others. But beyond these explanations for failure, where are the explanations and prescriptions for success? Over the years, international financial institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF have prescribed conflicting solutions such as structural adjustment program, economic recovery program, highly indebted poor country initiative, among others, presumably to remedy this situation. In most cases, however, these interventions have only yielded a relapse or a serious side effect. From the lenses of a distinguished African scholar and politician, this lecture seeks to explore these weighty matters using the following questions. Why are African economies generally small, fragmented, and non-performing? Why have the usual prescriptions failed over the years? Are there any more prescriptions at all? Or is it a hopeless case? If there are any prescriptions, what are they? And how do we make them work? I believe that as a university, we have a responsibility to society as an institution that trains the needed manpower for the country and the continent's development to be interested in the welfare of our economy. I would like to commend the Institutional Advancement Office for organizing today's lecture. I wish to extend my sincerest gratitude to our sponsors, Prudential Bank Limited, Quenjin International Ghana Limited, GCB Bank Limited, and our media partners, ATL FM, Joy 99.7 FM, Joy News, Eagle FM, and KG Multimedia. On this note, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you once again to the Advancement Lecture Series 2017. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prof. Chair. I now have the honor to invite the coordinator of the Institutional Advancement Office, Solomon Fache Esquire, to give us a brief on the Advancement Lecture Series. Shall we welcome him?
It is with great pleasure that I respond to this invitation to give a brief background to the Advancement Lecture Series. The Advancement Lecture Series, ALS for short, is an initiative of the Institutional Advancement Office of the University of Cape Coast, established in January 2014 under an instrument of the University Council. The lecture series was carved as a strategic response to the university's mandate, which is to be a university that is responsive and offers solutions and alternatives to the needs of the wider society. Prof. Chair, ALS seeks to provide an engaging platform on which statesmen, academics, researchers, practitioners, among others, reflect on teasing national and international problems and offer creative solutions. The first edition was in 2015 under the chairmanship of the former Vice Chancellor, Professor D.D. Kupole, who I must say is the founding Vice Chancellor of Advancement. And I'm also very pleased to observe that this is his first official university assignment after retirement. Among the guest speakers for the first edition was our own alumnus, Kojo Opon Kroma, who is the MP for Fwasi, Ayirebi in the Ashanti region, and now a Deputy Minister for Information. They spoke on the topic, a multi-partite approach to combat corruption. How do we achieve this? The second edition was under the chairmanship of our able current Vice Chancellor, yours truly, Professor Joseph Gatampia. The speaker was Dr. Emmanuel Kwete, Executive Director for the Institute of Democratic Governance. And he spoke on the topic, towards credible 2016 elections, the role of stakeholders in ensuring free, fair, transparent, and violence-free elections. On the third anniversary of this lecture, which we mark today, we thought it wise to select a topic that resonates with our collective African experience. Thus, the topic, Building Stronger Economies for the African Continent, the Missing Link. We believe this topic sits firmly with our vision as a university to respond with ideas and alternatives towards dealing with the African economic conundrum. For our speaker, we chose a person who we believe has sufficiently engaged the discipline of African development economics from the perspectives of a teacher, a scholar, a public servant, a bureaucrat, a researcher, and a politician. In the person of our very own Vice President, His Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. We hope that this lecture will provide useful input for the research agenda of our students and faculty, and also contribute to the discourse of developing stronger economies for the African continent. Thank you for your audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker today is Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. Vice President of the Republic of Ghana and head of Ghana's economic management team. He is an economist and banker by training. He served as Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Ghana between 2006 and 2009. Between 2009 and 2010, he was a visiting scholar at the Center for the Study of African Economies, Oxford University. He also served as resident representative for the African Development Bank in Zimbabwe in 2011 and 2012. He was a visiting scholar at the University of British Columbia in Canada and a senior associate member of St. Anthony's College, University of Oxford. Between 2013 and 2015, he held these positions. Also, Dr. Bawumia was visiting professor of economic governance at Central University, Ghana. Dr. Bawumia also served as an assistant professor of economics at Hankamen School of Business, Baylor University, Texas, USA, from 1996 to 2000. Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia holds a BSc Economics, first class honors. From the University of Buckingham, UK. A master's degree in development economics from Oxford University. He was at the Lincoln College. And a PhD in economics from Simon Fraser University in Canada. He is an associate of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, UK and ACIB, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, FCIB, Ghana. Dr. Bawumia has published several articles in referee journals and has also published 2 books on monetary policy and economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, we therefore have an economist and a well-seasoned one to speak on our topic today, developing stronger economies for the African continent, the missing link. Your Excellency, Alhaji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, please take it.
It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you this afternoon. I would like to thank the University of Cape Coast for the kind invitation extended to me to participate and contribute to the 3rd Advancement Lecture Series. I bring you greetings from my boss, Nana Adodankwa Akufo-Addo, the President. In the context of this advancement lecture series, I would like to state that the University of Cape Coast, UCC itself, is a study in advancement. UCC was established in 1962 and opened its doors in 1963 with 256 students. We have come a long way. In 2015-2016 academic year, the total student body was 19,353. UCC has also expanded from training of teachers to a full-fledged university now offering medicine and law. It has now arguably become the university of competitive choice. I would like to thank those who have led the university and helped build it to today's UCC, and those who continue to do so. They have done an excellent job. Let me now turn to the topic of this lecture: developing stronger economies for the African continent, the missing link. Professor Chairman, the question of how countries develop and build strong economies is one that has preoccupied economists since the days of Adam Smith, who focused on the inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. This was Adam Smith's seminal work, the inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. This was in 1776. He wanted to know why some countries are rich and others poor. In this book, he espoused the power of free markets in the allocation of resources to their optimal uses. This is the subject matter. This is a subject matter that has been researched by economists and philosophers such as Karl Marx over the last 200 years. This question is akin to the search for the Holy Grail in development economics. Researchers have variously sought to supply the missing link. Various studies have come out with various links: better schooling, good health, managed fertility, work ethics, discipline of the labor force, higher rates of savings and investment, productivity, and technological advances are critical. Other research have shown that government actions such as taxation, maintenance of law and order, stable and well-functioning financial markets, and macroeconomic stability matter a great deal. Then you have studies that show that peace and social stability, as well as institutions, are also paramount to building stronger economies. Wars and conflicts are disruptive. They destroy wealth created and human capabilities. All of these factors, according to Professor Robert Barrow of Harvard University, are of profound importance to everyone concerned with the business of building stronger economies. But this afternoon, in line with the topic of this lecture, I will focus broadly on one missing link in the developing of stronger African economies, which is the building the productive capacity of nations. Building the productive capacities of nations. The argument that I will espouse today is that countries with stronger productive capacities build stronger economies. I will draw on the experiences of Singapore, Switzerland, Norway, and Mauritius to make a number of points. And I will conclude that strong economies are built on the back of strong and steadily expanding productive capacity of nations on the back of sound economic governance. Professor Chairman, when we look at the history of Africa's economic growth performance, Africa's economic growth performance historically has been driven by resource exploitation and exports of unprocessed raw materials. The consequences of this dependence on raw materials by African countries generally are as follows. First, our economies are vulnerable to commodity price shocks sudden and unanticipated declines in prices of our commodity exports, such as cocoa, trigger revenue shortfalls and undermine our ability to implement budgets and to manage our public finances. Second, the low value addition to both our agricultural products and mineral resources means our exports are very low income content. And secondly, we lose the opportunities to create jobs by processing our raw materials. Third, by exporting our raw materials, we are unable to use these natural resources as the basis to industrialize and to expand productive capacities. The combination of these four consequences means that we have non-resilient, weak, and undiversified economies. Non-resilient, weak, and undiversified economies. Professor Chairman, although Ghana, for example, graduated from the less developed economy status to lower middle income status in 2007, the recent fall in world commodity prices in oil, minerals, and cocoa remind us how vulnerable our economy is to external shocks. We are faced with the risks of being trapped in this low middle income status if we don't push our productive capacities beyond the mere extraction. If we don't push our productive capacities beyond the mere extraction and exports of raw materials. In fact, like many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, there is the danger that Ghana's, as well as other African countries' rapid population growth, which is about 2.2% per annum and twice the global average of 1.12%, and our demographic dynamics, about 58% of the population in Ghana is below 25 years. This alone can push us back into a low-income development trap because our reliance on natural resources exploitation alone and our low productivity in agriculture will just not be enough to lift average incomes. Ultimately, Professor Chairman, strong economies are built on the back of strong and steadily expanding productive capacity and sound economic governance. Economists have a tool of analysis called the production possibilities frontier. This simple yet powerful tool of long-term growth analysis, in its basic form, describes the limits of every economy's productive capabilities. The production possibilities frontier tells us the maximum amount of goods and services that an economy can produce given its endowments. One of the most important questions in first-year economics is what are the factors that expand the production possibilities frontiers of the country's production of a country. Common answers include new discoveries of natural resources, improved human capabilities, increased savings and investment, improved infrastructure, and increased technological innovations. All these factors contribute to building stronger economies. The World Economic Forum reports annually on the Global Competitiveness Index developed by Professor Xavier Salai Martin of Columbia University. The index reports on how nations are doing on the factors, policies, and institutions that determine the level of a nation's productive capacity. It is an indicator of how the productive capacities of nations are changing to make economies stronger or weaker. The report's findings are startling. With all our natural resource endowments, with all our farmlands, Africa's potential to building stronger economies dims considerably compared to countries which don't have these natural endowments, but have pushed harder in building their productive capacities. So what exactly is productive capacity? The United Nations defines productive capacity as, and I quote, the set of capability factors that enable countries to produce more goods and services, and to do so efficiently at least cost and of highest quality. It is the combination of human capabilities, natural resources, physical and environmental assets, technological assets, institutional assets that determine the level and the path of a country's economic growth, its ability to produce goods and services, and enough to improve the well-being of the population. Professor Chairman, building productive capacity boils down to three things. One, developing the depth and quality of human capabilities. Two, developing technological capacity in our production processes, at home, at the office, and in industry. And three, cultivating the rule of law, high policy, and institutional capabilities of government. Let me expand on these. Developing human capacity is the first step in building skills, knowledge, and creative capabilities. It is intrinsic to individuals' means as higher incomes and more rewarding careers. The American, Canadian, and European higher education are noted for their reputation in research capabilities, in invention, and in creativity. Higher education is also intrinsic to the success of nations. The obsession of countries like the United States, Canada, Germany, Mauritius, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, amongst others, with developing their human capital makes so much sense. And that is how they are transforming their economies. For a continent with about 41% of its population below the age of 15 years and 60% below the age of 25 years, that is the state of Africa. 41% below 15 years and 60% below 25 years. For this continent, developing skills and knowledge capacity of children and teenagers is a matter of urgency if we are to change the course of our economic history. Second, developing technological capacity, much of which depends on our human capacity in scientific thinking, is the second pillar to building productive capacities and stronger economies. Germany's industrial machinery, Japanese scientific thinking, and industrial spirit account for their productive capacities. Technological progress is generated by the emergence of new ideas, and it is born out of quality education. Quality education stimulates thinking. It nurtures creativity. Creativity, in turn, drives technology and innovation. Any nation that cannot create new ideas, that cannot develop risk-taking entrepreneurial classes, will never lead the march of progress. In fact, that nation may not even be able to follow the leaders in the catching up process, because its citizens cannot even imitate innovation. This is why some countries are good at copying, while others cannot even copy successful models. Professor Chairman, looking at what creativity and technology can do, Bill Gates of Microsoft in 2016, this individual in 2016 had a net worth of $85.6 billion. This is more than the whole of Ghana's GDP, which is some $40 billion. So one individual who has just invented Microsoft is worth $85.6 billion. And we, with all our resources and 27 million people, we are worth $40 billion in GDP. Mark Zuckerberg, the computer programmer and internet entrepreneur, in 2016 has a net worth of 71 billion US dollars. In 2016, if you look at Africa, only Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, Sudan, and Angola had GDPs in excess of 70 billion, thanks to their wealth and resources. But when you look at the combined wealth of Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, it's about 157 billion. And in Africa, it is only exceeded by Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, and Algeria. Outside of these four countries, these two individuals are worth more than every other country in Africa. Some have wondered, Professor Chairman, some have wondered whether we can build stronger and resilient economies by pushing harder on science, mathematics, and technology than by exerting efforts in finding more minerals, oil, and gas. That is the question for all of us to answer. That in 2006, the World Bank set up a commission to study countries that have managed to build their economies since 1950. And this commission was headed by the Nobel laureate Michael Spence. The commission released its findings in 2008, and it made the following observation, and I will quote this. The commission stated after this comprehensive study that, and I quote, "In all cases of sustained high growth, the successful economies have absorbed know-how, technology, and more generally, knowledge from the rest of the world. These economies did not have to originate much of this knowledge, but they did have to assimilate it at a tremendous pace. Knowledge acquired from the global economy is thus the fundamental basis of the economic catch-up and sustained growth." So how much are we able to imbibe from knowledge that is out there in the global economy? That is the conclusion of the study by the World Bank Commission. In fact, this conclusion is something that has been understood by a few countries for a very long time. If you look at Japan, in Japan, you saw the collapse of the Tokugawa regime in Japan in 1867. Now, Japan, under the Tokugawa regime, was operating a very isolationist policy. They actually thought they were so much better than anybody else in the world. And they thought they were more advanced than anybody else in the world. So they didn't, in fact, want to mix with anybody else. So they had a very isolationist policy until they were encountered by Admiral Perry with gunboats, and a war ensued, and they were overpowered. And I think they began with a major restoration in 1867, began to look outward. They realized that in terms of technology, they were quite behind. And they began to look outward. In fact, the Japanese educational system was imported from France, wholesale pretty much, and began to try to get as much from the global stock of knowledge as possible. And a lot of people wonder why Japanese, when they go everywhere, are taking pictures of everything they can find. And this was essentially bringing home to the country what they are seeing abroad and what they can learn from it. Professor Chairman, empirical evidence also shows that the development and maintenance of the rule of law, developing policy capabilities of government, institutional capacity, and high-quality governance is the important third pillar in building stronger economies. I'll now examine the case studies of Singapore, Norway, and Mauritius. The Singapore story. Singapore is a country with no natural resources, no farmland, but is obsessed with human capital development and productivity. Singapore moved from labor-intensive economy in 1960s to skills-intensive in the 1970s, technology-intensive in the 1980s, and innovation-intensive in the 1990s. Today, it's a knowledge-intensive economy. It has grown from its traditional role as a regional seaport. Its only natural asset is the seaport. That's all. To an international manufacturing and knowledge-intensive services center. Singapore's wealth is based on skills, knowledge, and technology in its politically stable environment. In fact, its per capita income has grown from $533 in 1965 to $40,920 in 2010 and $52,090 in 2016. In this period, Ghana's per capita income has reached $1,513. When it comes to global competitiveness and the determinants of long-term growth, Switzerland, Singapore, and the United States have remained the top 3 economies 6 years running in the World Economic Forum assessment. The highest ranking African country, Mauritius, was 45th among the list of 138 countries, followed by South Africa, which is 61st, Rwanda 58th, Botswana 63rd, Ghana 114. But at least we beat Nigeria 125. I used to argue with my Nigerian friend about how well Ghana was. And I used to like to show him all sorts of indicators. Until one day he said, I will show you one indicator. I said, what is it? He said, look at this. I said, what? He said, fertilizer consumption. We are higher than you. So I said, Victor, you can have that one. In 2016, Singapore topped improvements in higher education and training, one of the top efficiency enhancers in South Asia and the Pacific. Singapore also runs one of the world's most efficient public institutions. Let's look at Switzerland. According to the World Economic Forum, Switzerland possesses one of the most fertile innovation ecosystems. It mines no gold or diamond, or for that matter, any of the Earth's rare minerals, and it has no cocoa farm. But Switzerland combines the conducive policy environment and first-class infrastructure with academic excellence and an unmatched capacity to attract the best talent. It adds value to our raw cocoa into chocolate. It imports and refines crude oil and exports finished products profitably to many countries, including Nigeria. In fact, Ghana is Switzerland's largest trading partner in Africa, importing gold and cocoa from Ghana. Now you look at Norway. From fishing to oil and gas, Norway has emerged as the global agent in oil and gas technology. On the back of good governance, stable democracy, and efficient management of its petroleum resources, Norway has emerged as one of the most diversified and wealthiest economies in the world, with very, very high and sustainable standard of living. In fact, its pension funds are exceeding $1 trillion right now. Mauritius, let's look at Mauritius. Mauritius has progressed from a 3-pillar economy. They were moved an economy based on sugarcane, tourism, and textiles. Those were the 3 pillars. Sugarcane, tourism, and textiles. They've progressed into a modern, strong economy revolving around agriculture, manufacturing, financial sector, ICT, real estate, and hospitality to become a knowledge-intensive island. It has had one of the most impressive growths in per capita income over the 40-year period since the 1970s in Africa. Its per capita income, its GDP per capita, more than tripled in 30 years from 1981 to 2010. According to the African Transformation Report in 2014, published by the African Center for Economic Transformation, Mauritius owes its remarkable economic performance to sound economic governance, steady reforms to sustain long-term growth, effective state-business relations, capable institutions, stable democracy, good education, and macroeconomic discipline. Mauritius has been improving its position in international indices for the rule of law, investment, and ease of doing business. The island is first in sub-Saharan Africa on the rule of law index. It has earned international recognition as a safe and trusted jurisdiction. The government intends to transform the island into a regional ICT hub by constructing technology parks and diversifying into software and disaster recovery centers. I should note that in Mauritius, education is free from kindergarten to university. Mr. Chairman, even here we are struggling with free SHS. Mr. Chairman, what is clear is that these countries that I've just talked about continue to develop their human capital through higher education and training. Norway has done so to complement their natural resource endowments. Others have done so to compensate for their lack of natural resource endowments. Their productive capacity is built on efficiency enhancers and innovation, strong and capable institutions of governance, and stable governance. What about Ghana? The story in building stronger economies in the context of Ghana. Professor Chairman, from the time of our independence, we inherited a colonial economy. Our production system, infrastructural development, transport network, banking services, and even our education system were all organized to serve colonial needs and excluded the majority of our population. The multiple structural weaknesses of our economy, our vulnerabilities to external shocks, the infrastructural bottlenecks, and the constraints on private sector activities are all well known. Our dependency on raw commodity exports, the lack of diversification, low adoption of technology in our production activities on the farm and in our offices further underscore our weak productive capacities. Farm productivity is low. Industrial productivity is also low compared, for example, to South Asian countries. Ghana has, since the year 2000, gone through 4 medium-term development plans, 2 generations of poverty reduction strategies, and 2 generations of Ghana's shared growth and development agenda. These are very much in line with the Millennium Development Goals: immediate poverty reduction, reducing hunger, health, and basic social amenities took center stage in these efforts. The ensuing economic downturn and the fiscal shocks to the entire global economy, together with the recent fall in commodity prices, once more have exposed the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of our economy. A joint United States-Ghana government study, Ghana Constraint Analysis, was published in 2011, and it observed that continuing our business-as-usual approach to development will not deliver us the Asian miracle type of transforming our economy, even with the oil discovery. If you take another example, in 1960, South Korea's national income per head was the same as Ghana's at $183 per capita. By 1980, South Korea's income had gone up 4 times more than Ghana's, $411 per capita. By 2015, South Korea's income per head was nearly 20 times more than Ghana's. Keep in mind that South Korea has no mining, no oil, no major agricultural export, and it's a highly populated country within a small territory. Their high technology boom, automobiles, shipbuilding, Steel and rapid development owe much to their rigorous education system. A highly motivated and educated population and collective focus and determination to build a stronger economy that is inclusive. Professor Chairman, what we have learned from our past and the lessons from others worldwide must inform our paths to building a stronger, resilient, and inclusive economy. The idea of inclusion is critical. It represents a paradigm shift from the past, where most of our population were excluded from fully participating in the economy or realizing their full economic potential. Our view as a government is that if you exclude most of your population in the manner that we have done in the past, you will not be able to build a strong economy. Historically, many Ghanaians and many Africans have been excluded from schooling because of the inability to pay school fees. Many people have had difficulty even opening bank accounts. People have been excluded because they don't even exist officially. They don't have a birth certificate or a national ID number. We don't even know where they live. Everybody is just there in the chaos. We are all just there. Many rural areas have problems with water, with roads, with toilets, these basics. So our strategy, ladies and gentlemen, as a government, is to change the paradigm, is to try to move away from exclusion to inclusion. And if you are within the bounds of your production possibility frontier, and you are trying to reach at least the production possibility frontier, you cannot do so by excluding most of your people. You have to be inclusive, bring your people on board, then you will get to reach the production possibilities frontier. And that is the thinking, ladies and gentlemen, that is driving what we are trying to do in many areas. So our strategy is to strive for inclusion to build our productive capacities. This strategy, however, has got to be underpinned by a commitment to fiscal discipline and macroeconomic stability to be sustainable. Professor Chairman, despite the massive growth in the tertiary education subsector since the early 2000s, the enrollment ratio in our tertiary education sector has remained low compared to other African countries. As a result, we are witnessing an increasing army of uneducated 15 to 25-year-olds with little or no skills of work and therefore unemployable. For a country with nearly 20% of its population in this age group, this group of young people represent a worrying and developed human productive capacity, and with time they could become our potential wasted assets, and we must not allow that to happen. Our approach to building a stronger economy must begin with the ambition and the commitment to intensify the development of our human capabilities. The recently introduced free SHS signals government's determination to ensure the greatest number of our young people gain access to pre-university education. We cannot advance in technological innovation, we cannot take advantage of technology transfer and adoption, and we cannot nurture entrepreneurial skills without an inclusive access to education. Education for all is imperative in a world of rapid technological innovations. It is inconceivable that children should be denied access to education at the early age of 12 simply because of their financial circumstances. Enriching our human capital must begin early if the young are to develop skills of work, gain knowledge, and deepen their thinking and creative skills for enterprise and innovation. It is for this same rationale of building the human capital that we are restoring the teacher training and nursing training allowances this month. Professor Chairman, we are not only providing access, but in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, we are also emphasizing quality education and gender equality. In the long run, ladies and gentlemen, building the human capacity in this way, nurturing creative minds, is the first step to building a generation of innovative entrepreneurs and problem solvers in all aspects of our life, including how we manage our natural resources. In a September 2017 UN report titled "In School But Learning Nothing," this was a report just released last month. In school but learning nothing. There were some troubling observations. 6 out of 10 children and teenagers in the world are failing to reach basic level proficiency in learning. In sub-Saharan Africa, about 88% of children and teenagers, we are very good at mobile phones. That one we will beat everybody. In sub-Saharan Africa, about 88% of children and teenagers enter adulthood without the proficiency in reading and comprehension. In Mali, the number is 93%. Now, in Japan, the number is 1%. But these are the countries we have to compete with. Professor Chairman, we should worry about the quality of education of the future movers of the economy's productive capacity and production possibilities frontier. We should worry about the quality of those we graduate and certify and teach our children. The vision for Africa in Agenda 2063, launched by the African Union, is that at least 70% of all high school graduates should go on to have tertiary education, with 70% of those graduating in subjects related to sciences, mathematics, and technology. We must build our science and technological capabilities because we live in a world of science and rapidly changing technology. Professor Chairman, part of the missing link of productive capacity has to do with our infrastructure constraints in energy, transportation, communications, and utilities. Quite simply, you cannot build productive capacity with Dumso. Electricity drives our everyday applications of innovations in science and technology, at home, in the workplace, in public and private sector, in agriculture, in health. Our production capacities depend in a large measure on access to power. We must work hard to keep the lights on and securely and efficiently. Our goal, fundamentally, is to move Ghana away and from the dependence on thermal energy towards renewable energy as the primary source of power for our homes, offices, and certainly for all public facilities. It is for this reason that our government has taken the decision and announced the policy that henceforth, and it is being implemented, henceforth the government will no longer sign any power purchase agreements for thermal plants for Ghana. Henceforth, we will only sign power purchase agreements to the extent that we need them only for renewable energy, period. Professor Chairman, in the last 4 months, government has been working jointly with the private sector and stakeholders to try to build the capacity of our seaports. If Singapore, all they have is their seaport and they are growing so far, we've had our seaport also for a while. Let's try to see how we can improve the capacity of our seaports. And we've been working with the private sector to try to do this over the last few months. We realized that our seaports, especially, remain as underutilized assets. First, as catalysts for trade and growth, and second, as sources of revenue mobilization. This has to change if we are to expand our trading capacity, build up our competitiveness in facilitating trade in the West African sub-region, serving the landlocked countries Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. We are innovating our port processes and systems. We have since September 1st this year gone paperless at the Tema port to keep abreast with global standards in world trade. We have to learn from the best. And when we evaluated what was wrong at our ports in Tema, we realized that there was too much manual intervention. And so we wanted to make it paperless, as happens in many advanced countries and many of the leading seaports in the world. And we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We are taking advantage of technology transfer and knowledge diffusion from some of the leading ports and customs management in the world. We call them all here, whether it's Dubai, Singapore, Antwerp, all of them, we brought them to Accra and asked them, tell us what you do. We had a good discussion and we said, okay, we figured it out, thank you very much. We'll also try and do what you have done. And we began this whole process of the paperless port. We set up the goal on May 1st, and we basically, thankfully with some assistance, we've gone ahead to implement it. We are implementing a series of reforms at the ports to ease the cost of doing business, to strengthen and to make the most of our ports as national assets. But I would like to tell you today that we've done this paperless, this movement, and it's not been a small movement. We've done this movement from manual to paperless between May and September. It is working very well, and we implemented it using our existing systems, but just changing the workflows to make it paperless. And the Minister of Finance will be happy to hear that we finished this without spending even 1 pesewa of government money. It was not a matter of money, it was a matter of systems. And we basically were able to do it. Mr. Chairman, another area of building a strong economy is in the institutional and governance capacity. We are doing this through information communication technology, ICT, and we have strong intentions of harnessing ICT towards enhancing our institutional and governance capacity. We have a number of initiatives underway, and I'll mention 4 to start with. First is the institutional reforms in registering businesses and license renewals. We are in the process, and we've been working very closely with the Registrar General's Department. All of you who have tried to register a business at the Registrar General's know how difficult the process is. And cumbersome the process is. So we've had a series of meetings, and we've begun the process. And thanks to the effort of the people at the Registrar General's Department, later this month, Ghana is going to go fully online for the registration of businesses, and we should be and with that, we should be able to get our licenses definitely within a day or a few days. It should be that simple. Second, we said, well, if you are going to build the capacity of this country, we first have to know who is in the country. And so we have begun the process. It was launched a few weeks ago of issuing national ID cards to everybody. That is very critical to managing a country and knowing where everybody, who everybody is in the country. And so the process of issuing national ID cards will begin en masse next month. Third, we are introducing, and you will be happy to hear, Ghana's digital address system with unique postcodes for every location within Ghana. For the longest time, if you are looking for somebody's house, the cocoa seller on the right, the blue kiosk on the left, by the gutter before you get there. And then the day that cocoa seller doesn't appear, you are in trouble. So we have said that we want to implement. Ghana is huge, by many standards, it's huge. There are so many villages, towns, and so on. We want to use the existing technology to implement a digital addressing system. So this is the task we set ourselves when we came into government. And that task has thankfully been accomplished. The digital addressing system is going to provide, for me, if I look at it and I'm biased, of course, it's going to provide us the most advanced addressing system in the world. Period. This is what we are about to roll out. And it is more advanced, of course, than the United States or United Kingdom or Sweden or Germany, because they are stuck with old technology. We are leapfrogging, and we are going to new technology. We are going to GPS-based technology. So even if you are standing in the middle of the river Oti and you want your address, when we roll it out, you will know your address in the middle of the river Oti. The wache seller in any part of the country will be able to tell you, this is my address. And the system will take you immediately to that wache seller. Or the market woman in Makola or any market store. Sometimes you go to the market, you buy something, and you want to go back to the same place, and you can't remember exactly where to find it. That you will be able to. It is unbelievable. We have been able to put together 16.1 billion addresses. Every 5 by 5 meter square part of Ghana has a unique address. Every 5 by 5 meter square has a unique address. And so we are very, very excited, and it's going to be, and the postcodes will be there. When you look at the address, you know that this is Greater Accra region, it's from this district, and this is the postcode. We'll be able to tell immediately by looking at the address. And it's very, very exciting. But even what is more exciting about this new address system is that it was actually designed by Ghanaians in Dansuma. I'm telling you, our men and women, they are good. They are amazing. And they beat the international competition. They just beat the international competition. Because when we thought this is what we want, and we said this is the sort of system we want, we were wondering if our people could be able to deliver it. But they surprised us, and thankfully we are going to launch, by the grace of God, the new digital addressing system in 2 weeks' time. We will launch it in Ghana. We will launch it in Ghana. And what is very, very interesting, because we are so focused on value for money, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this. When we were looking for this digital addressing system, we had all sorts of proposals. Someone said 70 billion, someone said $70 million, someone said $100 million, and so on. But finally, after all the work that was done, this massive system, which is going to transform this economy, was only done for $2.5 million. That was it. We had major value for money in its production. And it was done in Ghana. So if you really focus on value for money, you can get it. You can get it. Mr. Chairman, Professor Chairman, the fourth thing we are doing is the introduction of the interoperable payment system in the financial sector. if you are going to build productive capacity, your people must be able to pay for goods and services across. And having an interoperable payment system between banks, mobile operators, and other financial and non-financial sector players enables us to make payments to anyone else in a convenient, affordable, fast, seamless, and secure way with only one account. Payments for buying and selling will be made much more easy throughout the country. Interoperability is the key to financial inclusion. And we have struggled with this matter for almost 20 years. So when we came into government, we said that we needed to do this. In fact, I must say that there were many people who were offering similar solutions. But thankfully, the Bank of Ghana, in collaboration with the Ghana Interbank Payment System, which is owned by the Bank of Ghana, has finally been able to solve this problem. And the interoperable payment system for Ghana, by the grace of God, will be launched next month, in November this year. What is even more remarkable about what has happened as far as payment system interoperability in Ghana is concerned? Again, a lot of people were quoting millions. In fact, there was one quote of $1 billion to build this system for Ghana. It became an issue of public debate not long ago because someone quoted $1 billion. In fact, for it, apparently, some contract was apparently being signed for that. $1 billion to build this system. By the way, this system has now been built for less than $4 million. Less than $4 million. So again, value for money. We have to protect the public space, and that allows us to build our productive capacity. Professor Chairman, next year, the paperless approach to streamline applications for passports, visas, construction and other permits, and driver's licenses will also come on board. In fact, once we complete the national ID card process, you will no longer need to fill an application form for a passport, since that data will already be there in the NIA database. So once we finish the national ID database, all you have to do is to go online and give your national ID number and your address and pay your fee, and the passport will be delivered in your home because they know your postcode. We have a digital address and it will be going straight. It's that simple. It's that simple. We are building a new economy. We are building an economy of productive capacities. Professor Chairman, for government, there are substantial benefits of these measures for the management of the economy and in all aspects of decision-making and planning. They help in better targeting the delivery of public services, whether it's in education, health, and other social services, in line with the 3 fundamental sustainable development goals to reduce poverty, eliminate hunger, and ensure good health in the well-being of citizens. Finally, building these types of information infrastructure should help us expand the tax base of the economy, increase domestic resource mobilization, to leverage private sector capital, to support development, and so on. Improved domestic revenue mobilization is paramount to building stronger economies. A robust domestic revenue mobilization is the most sustainable way to create fiscal space to finance much-needed infrastructure and other developments. Expanding productive capacity in agriculture is key. The Planting for Food and Jobs program, with its access to seeds and fertilizer by farmers, has been a success. We expect a bumper harvest this year, notwithstanding the challenge of the fall army worm. Also, a Marshall Plan in agriculture with additional attention to roads and irrigation will be the focus of the 2018 budget. Furthermore, the One Village, One Dam program in the 3 northern regions will be launched before the end of this year. Professor Chairman, building productive capacity in industry is also fundamental. We must add value to our raw materials to start with. The One District, One Factory initiative, as well as strategic anchored industries in pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, textiles, and so on, will help drive industrialization by the private sector. The Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program, IPEP, where we have decided to decentralize the capital expenditure budget by allocating the equivalent of $1 million per constituency for infrastructure in rural and deprived communities, along with the Zongo Development Fund. These are all intended to broaden the base of productive capacity, making our economic building stronger and more inclusive. So, summarizing, a country can attain lower middle income status by tapping into its natural resource endowments, by undertaking appropriate market and financial sector reforms, by opening up external trade opportunities through good microeconomic management, and through good, stable governance. But the global experience is that the continued march toward full middle income status and further to high income economies is possible only when a country has put in place national mechanisms to build in productive capacity. On the basis of our natural resource endowments, Africa has always been a hopeful continent. But if these were the only drivers of developing stronger economies, Korea, Mauritius, Singapore, and Switzerland would have had little or no potential for growth. Angola, Congo, Nigeria, and Mexico would have been some of the strongest economies in the world. And Ghana, with all its natural resources, would not be lagging too far behind. History has therefore taught us differently. Key for us going forward, building our human capital and capabilities. The days of schooling for schooling's sake, the chew, pour, pass, and forget syndrome should be over. Free SHS is here, but it is not a bargain for low quality. We want to enhance quality with it. You have a role to play as a university, nurturing and stimulating creative thinking, undertaking basic research in problems confronting society, and informing public policy making are the least we should expect from universities. Universities cannot decouple themselves from tackling the challenges in society. We look forward to the solutions from you. Universities must see themselves as also at the heart of helping to build stronger economies and stronger societies. Whether it is in the humanities, social sciences, physical sciences, and mathematics, quality education is the bedrock of our problem-solving skills, of our creative thinking, and generator of ideas. Leapfrogging technological innovations to the future, finding new ways of doing things are hallmarks of innovation and productivity. According to the World Economic Forum, the fourth industrial revolution era, we are at the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution era. Technology and innovation are increasingly driving development and a source of building stronger economies. Developing stronger economies requires transforming agriculture and food systems if we are to cope with the pressures of population growth, demographic dynamics, and food security. Developing stronger economies also requires good governance and protecting the social and economic opportunities of citizens. It also requires a change in our attitude, in the way we deal with our commonwealth. Those who steal from the commonwealth through embezzlement and corruption undermine our collective ability to build stronger economies because they distort working incentives. As a country, we must ask ourselves three simple questions. in our attempt to building stronger economies. One, do we want to remain a resource-based economy, extracting and exporting our diminishing resource endowments? Do we wish to depend on the generosity of others through aid? Or do we want to be knowledge-intensive and innovation-based inclusive economy? In my humble opinion, these are rhetorical questions. Of course, we want a Ghana in which we add value to our raw materials. We want a Ghana beyond aid. We don't want to be dependent on aid. We want to build a knowledge-based economy. To do all these, we must build our productive capacity as a nation. This is the missing link to building strong economies in Africa. Thank you for your attention. God bless you.
Shall we give His Excellency El-Haji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia another round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an inspiring and inevitably thought-provoking lecture. I think that this lecture has educated and inspired us as individuals and as a university. And for this lecture, we have two distinguished intellectuals to give 10-minute commentary each. And then afterwards, we're going to have question time. And then we will come to an end. Two distinguished intellectuals that we've selected to give us comments, to comment on the lecture that His Excellency has given. One is an academic, and the other one is an entrepreneur. But both of them are intellectuals. I'll briefly introduce them, and I'll introduce them together so that their commentaries will run one after the other. The first to speak will be Nana Sambru Butler, and Nana attended what they call the school. He attended the Fancy Film School, Cape Coast, and he graduated in business studies from the University of North London, England, way back in 1977. So I can see that some of you were not born at that time. And he gained professional qualification from the Institute of Purchasing and Supply in the UK. He also studied for an MA, that is Management Science, from the University of Kent at Canterbury, England. And he earned a postgraduate diploma in 1982. I must say that Nana is an entrepreneur. Nana Sambru Butler used to be the chairman of our governing council. So the immediate past chairman of University of Cape Coast Governing Council. And being an entrepreneur, Nana Sambri Butler is chairman of the Sen Power Generation Company Limited, which owns the 900 million US dollar gas combined cycle power project in Pong Tema with African Finance Corporation. So he's built his capital base, unlike some of us, His Excellency talked about. So, I wouldn't want to say too much about him. We will soon invite him to come to speak and give a comment on what has been said. But I'll turn to the second one, who is an academic. Professor Samuel Kobna Enim. Currently is the Directorate of Research, Innovation, and Consultancy here in the University of Cape Coast. Professor Samuel Kobna Enim is actually an associate professor of economics with specific concentration on micro development economics and applied micro econometrics at the Department of Economics, University of Cape Coast, Ghana. He earned a Bachelor of Arts, Master of Philosophy, and Doctor of Philosophy degrees in economics at the University of Cape Coast, Ghana, University of Ghana, Ghana, and University of Manchester, United Kingdom, respectively. So we have two stalwarts to talk to us. With a round of applause, we shall invite Nana Sambru Butler to speak to us.
Obviously, this topic under discussion today is very important. And the question about the African economy, or the underperformed African economy, has been a question that has exercised the minds of many Africans, our leaders, our economists, historians, political scientists, business people, and entrepreneurs, and even hawkers in our streets. I'm learning today that this has been since 1776. And we're still looking for answer to Africa's frustrating underperformance in a dynamic and thriving global arena. But I must admit, I'm not an academic or a policymaker looking for the perfect solution to a complex issue. I am a practical, open-minded individual, persistent, and result-oriented, taking one step at a time to create value in my little corner. This is me fiancé. My objective today is how can I extend my practical experience into an effective plan for the objective of creating a self-sustaining continental economy able to provide for the needs of a rapidly growing population. First, I'll talk about weak consultation and communication. In the daily life of an entrepreneur, we are conditioned as observers who must react to the policies that people in authority lay down. Most of the time, without seeking our input, it is, in my view, a missing link in the puzzle confronting a resource-rich but poor, underperforming continent. But lack of consultation is not the most important of the missing links. There are other factors many of which have been discussed in the annual Doing Business reports. Some include the opaque regulatory regimes, rules that lack logic and are irrelevant to the issues facing us, decisions that are inconsistent with the underlying philosophies we have adopted, weak civil service, professional base that sees the private sector as an obstacle to be subdued, thinking that the many rules are doing us a favor. His Excellency, a study conducted in Kenya of factory workers indicated that the factory workers in Kenya are as effective and productive as those in China and India. However, production costs are exorbitant in Kenya simply because of inefficient regulations and poor infrastructure. Professor Chairman, the Africa of 1.3 billion people in 54 sovereign countries has operated an economic structure that trades little, very little, with itself, but concentrates on exporting raw materials, as His Excellency alluded to enable it import manufacturing goods from other continents. This basic structure has remained unchanged for more than a century. Our production processes are archaic and unchanging, contributing to a worsening social conditions for the population. Yet, there are over 400 large international companies operating in Africa with recorded revenues of over $1 billion each. And putting all together, the yearly income will be over $1 trillion. It's believed that African countries will be able to increase today's manufacturing output, which is around 500 billion, to over 930 billion in the next 10 years, if and only if attention is paid to the manufacturing sector. That's what His Excellency was talking about, building productive capacity. His Excellency, you'll find it right here. The University of Cape Coast have this water, splash, produced here, and that is domestication. His Excellency, over the last 50 years or so, there has been a focus of increasing regional cooperation through the creation of economic unions. There are many examples: ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, COMESA, etc., etc. The regional economic blocs are good if they do not become the objective of policy. My view is that these economic unions contribute to extending the weaknesses of the nation state to the larger regional bloc and curtails the possibility of developing a coherent continental framework. Without an objective that sees them as temporary, they adopt protective barriers and mechanisms within the bloc that make it difficult to overcome the limited ambitions of small nation states, each seeking to provide for its needs. Apart from the regional blocs that impede growth prospects, Africa also does not seem to have a coherent long-term development strategy. Between the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank, we have been reduced to spectators who are inflicted with different fashionable agenda, whose implementation are half-hearted, I cannot be exhaustive, But I can add on to what His Excellency enumerated, and some of the reports include the 1986 Africa Policy, Our Common Future, the NEPAD, etc., etc., etc. But it is clear that these are not the solution. If it is just for writing purposes, then I'm sorry, we are lagging behind. It does not determine the path to progress. What we advocate for, or the experiences that we've seen, a large market, for me, is a necessary condition. In the American, Chinese, Russian, and European models, we see that the successful paradigm is the creation of a large integrated market, preferably a continent. That is the level where optimal development can take place. Since political power has been diffused, it does not seem possible that we can travel the road that other countries have found to be the key to success. But we can certainly learn lessons from their history and attempt to copy them. This is most unfortunate because some 57 years ago, there was a voice shouting from the wilderness that Africa must unite. Africa must unite for political and economic growth. But sad to say, this voice of a visionary leader advocating for a United States of Africa was described as over-ambitious. That voice, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, was that of no other than President Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, the founder. Am I going into stray areas? The founder, and the founder of this great university. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I could go on and elaborate on the experiences of doing business in an environment. And I would like to draw an analogy. Sometimes they call me a football administrator. Can we imagine that goalkeepers are being employed as strikers in a national endeavor? It is certainly not strange, therefore, that instead of seeking to score goals, they will be busy getting into the way of the strikers and therefore be earning red cards. Professor Chair, in America's case, the provision of nationwide infrastructure, roads, and power was the key to unlocking the continent's productive potential. When this was done, business was left to make productive investments. In Africa's case, the priorities seem to have been inverted. Politicians and policymakers are attempting to manage the business while neglecting the overriding priority of providing infrastructure. Out of adversity, new schemes are developed. In 1931, during the Great Depression, Roosevelt government designed the construction of the Hoover Dam with three objectives of controlling floods, providing irrigation and for culture, and producing power. The U.S. had started building roads at the state level in the 19th century. However, in 1956, the federal government got involved in a big way. The interstate highway system of coast-to-coast roads, funded by a tax on gasoline, brought coherence to road sector investment and eased trade. The American government built the Hoover Dam and built an interlocking system of federal roads to open their country. The effect of these two interventions propelled America's economy by marshalling the American productive force in an unprecedented way. The nation became a superpower. Let Africa learn the correct lessons from history. Therefore, my idea is that instead of trying to identify and solve all the problems in one report, that will be put aside a year on. Let the African experiment start by solving the infrastructural deficit. In September last year, I had the honor of being invited by the U.S. Trade Secretary to the American-African Business Forum, and present were about 15 African heads of state, including Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. And each of them, every speaker agreed that infrastructure development was sine qua non to all others for economic development. Let's open the continent up with roads, with railways, provide power, especially, His Excellency, as you said, renewables. Then challenge and support the African private sector to get on with it in delivering and diversifying the economies with focus on manufacturing, telecommunication, and the rest. Professor Chair, I've just Professor Chair, I'm just concluding. The missing link in the continent-wide is infrastructure that will liberate productive potential of Africa. Let African governments focus on roads, rails, power, north to the south roads, east to the west roads, coast to coast railways, power facilities for manufacturing and for agriculture. And let's see our continent flourishing. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia, Vice Chancellor, University of Cape Coast, kindly permit me, given the time constraint, to jump into my reaction based on the Vice President's speech. I summarize your speech under 6 key issues. Some of them I contend, others I would pose questions for us to discuss them. Your first issue has to do with productive capacity, and as you rightly said, this is a level 100 issue, so I'm not going to contend it. Your second issue has to do with the knowledge economy, which I very much appreciate, and is one of the things that I always talk about. But His Excellency, what we need to think about is, what is a knowledge economy in the sense of what is it that we need to do, but more importantly from my perspective, how well do you know what we have to do? I'm happy in your submission you talked about a number of interventions, and here as a colleague economist you would agree with me that the reasons why Africa remains where it is now is the basis for all the economies that we teach, economy of Ghana. But what we do not know as Africans are things that they do in reaction to the policies that we deliver. Let me put some statistics on record. Following the last round of the Ghana Living Standard Survey, colleagues, you should know that about 46% of Ghanaians hold a strong view that whatever you tell the government, they will not listen. So we live in an economy where it's a play game. We don't trust the government is not too sure of the reaction of the populace. What did I say? Almost 50% of Ghanaians are of the view that if you tell the government to do A, the government will not do it. His Excellency, let's go down. Let's go down the line of the policies that you enumerated. You talked about infrastructure, you talked about identification system. I applaud the government for doing that. Again, these are things that have been done in the developed world, so copying as a country is not an issue. What is important here, His Excellency, is to think about what are we going to get out of these things. I'm happy, and Ghana should commend you for the data that you bring to fore in your speeches. But I'm going to pick on this same data. You talked about 2.5 million, compared it to a value of 1 million from another competitor. You talked about the value of 4 million, compared it to another 1 billion from another competitor. His Excellency, what is going to happen if we change the base for the discussion? What is the real value for money? So what would that 2.5 million, again, as you would agree with me, from basic economy scale of preference, what are the alternatives to the 2.5 million? These are, please, 10 minutes. These are the issues that I'm bringing for our discussion. Again, on the issue of data, again, I applaud you for that. We live in a country where, following the GLSS 6, unemployment was 5.2. The Ghana Statistical Service, 2 years down the line, released data that says that unemployment in Ghana is 11.9. His Excellency, how do you make policies along these lines? I move from a knowledge-based economy to your third issue, which has to do with inclusiveness. Again, you received my commendation on that. Education is the pillar for development. Nobody contests that. But again, you would agree with me that if you look at the data, again from the Ghana Statistical Service, they classify the proportion of Ghanaians into 4 main domains. Those without any education, almost 20%. Those with less than BEC MSLC, 44%. Those with JHS MSLC, about 17%. And those with SS and above, about 14%. His Excellency, it's a good idea that you are focused on the proportion that would fill that gap of those who are going to complete that. But let's take a careful scrutiny at the numbers. Those with less than MSLC, 44%, close to 50%. As an economist, I ask myself, why do you concentrate on another percentage? In any case, the basis for the free SHS is that JHS is free. This is a free system. But what is the percentage? 44%. Let's step back and ask His Excellency, what should Ghanaians expect from the free SHS? Let me give you the statistics over the period what has happened. In 1991, the proportion of those finishing SHS and above was just 6%. Over the period, it has graduated to 10% in 98, 99, 2005, 2006, it was 13%, 2012, 2013, it was 14%. With that free SHS, we've seen a doubling of the proportion of people who are completing SHS. His Excellency, what Ghanaians would want to hear is how does the free SHS, in terms of investment, translate from an output point of view? How much percentage or what proportion of Ghanaians do we expect to hold SHS and above by 2020? All of us heard His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo yesterday alluding to the fact that about 100,000 people who otherwise would not have had the opportunity to enter SHS through the free SHS, they are there. We commend you for that. But again, as an economist, you would agree with me that this is an output. What the two of us should be thinking about is, what is the outcome? What is the impact? How would that translate into poverty reduction? How would that translate into inequality? I move on my discussion by way of summarizing, colleagues please. By way of summarizing, I tell His Excellency, based on the data that I've shared with you and based on the reactionary perspective of economic agents, I conclude by drawing the attention of His Excellency to, again, some basic economic theory. I'm very happy you alluded to the fact that development economy started way back in Adam Smith's time in 1776. Ghana is no different. In 1951, our first president invited the 1979 Nobel laureate, Arthur Lewis, to come and help us. He was the first economic advisor. There was a follow-up between political expediency and economic expediency. What we really need to do, His Excellency, is to come to the table and interrogate the people. When we talk about knowledge economy, let's be frank in talking about not what we have to do. The most important things is what I've summarized are how you have to do it, when you have to do it, in terms of sequencing, scale of preference, and more importantly, the implications of what you are doing. Who is going to hold the government responsible for all the nice interventions that are going to happen in the next month or so? Thank you very much.
And academic freedom is about exercising our intellectual capacities to talk without any inhibition. And today we have intellectuals on the table. So we'll give opportunity for 5 people from my left and 5 right.
Your Excellency, you just informed us of the rolling out of PSCs. And per the statistics, we have over 400,000 students being enrolled. Currently, the University of Cape Coast has a capacity, as at the recent admission, to admit only just a little over 5,000 students. Now, what plans are being put in place to prevent just promoting certain wasted assets from JHS from being dropouts to become SHS dropout, which is another form of wasted assets, as you espoused in your presentation? Thank you.
My question is on natural resources. Professor Lumumba, on his speech on the theme Magnification of Africa at Tanzania University Kwame Nkrumah Hall, said it is a case for a country to have all natural resources if that country look down on the human resources, that is providing skilled laborers. We notice in Ghana that all towns and villages with these resources are most illiterate. What initiatives have the government put in place to help emerge students from bookish state to particularized state? Thank you.
The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development Report 2008 on creative economy suggests that arts and culture seems to be a possible option for developing countries when it comes to economic growth. Now my question is, what is the place of arts and culture in the productive capacity towards this economic growth in Ghana and government commitment to that? Thank you.
If my memory serves me right, and I got your presentation very well, I think we are moving into a technological era. And if I may ask, in an era where the system in Ghana is very difficult to monitor everyone, where cyber fraud has a canker and a ghost, which everyone in the street is scared of, what are some of the contingencies that the current government is putting in place to solve such a problem? Thank you very much.
And first of all, I would like to thank the second speaker for reminding us of Osagyefo vision, which is the unity of Africa. But secondly, I'm overwhelmed by Your Excellency's lecture, because I could deduce that some portion of the lecture was more like an outsider criticizing the failure of Ghana's economy and admiring the success of some economies. Basically talk about Singapore and Malaysia and other ones. But please, on the contrary, we know that Ghanaians have mandated you to repair the failed economy of our country. So please, what are some mechanisms that you've put in place? Because we know that currently our resources are being controlled by multinational companies. So please, what are some mechanisms that you've put in place to reclaim our resources from these multinational companies and use it to build our economy? Thank you.
His Excellency will respond to the first 5, and then we'll take the next 5.
Thank you very much for these very insightful questions. I think probably about 6 questions or so in the first round. I think the whole issue of whether in starting free SHS we are setting ourselves for failure at a higher level where people are not able to gain access to tertiary education. I think that the whole idea that people should not have access to secondary school because they may not have access to tertiary education is an idea I cannot agree with at all. I think that you have to make the necessary investments that you need to make in the tertiary level to prepare to absorb the people who are going to come through. We are not just doing this out of some trial and error. There is a systematic approach to the implementation of this policy and the emphasis on education to make sure, as I've said during the lecture, that tertiary education is where really the ideas, the innovation, and so on are sort of milk for the economy. And so you will see increasing investment in education and tertiary education as well as secondary education. The president has made it clear his priority is education. And therefore, we should focus our investment there and let the private sector take care of the other parts of the economy. But the social sectors is where we should invest. So I am very, very excited about the increasing numbers that are going into the free SHS. And we will expect more. And then in about 20 years' time, God willing, this country will see the massive impact of this increase in our human capital on the economy. As policymakers, we should not think of the short term when we take decisions. We should think about the country at the time we are no longer in office. Think about the long term and make the policy decisions that will stand the economy in good stead. And that is what we are doing. So we are taking those decisions now for the economy. And of course, we want to make, as I have said, we want to make sure that the curriculum is also relevant to what we are doing in the economy. And in that case, the second question talks about, we don't want bookish graduates who don't know how to practically contribute to society once they leave school. And I think that is very important, and in the vocational training that we are having, in the type of expansion of the economy that we are trying to build. You want people who will come out who can contribute directly to the economy. So whether it's in education, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in health, whether it's in industry, agriculture, you want people who would be able to contribute productively as a result of the training that they have gotten in school. Arts and culture, and I agree with this questioner on arts and culture. I think that as a country, we have really underestimated the impact of arts and culture on our productivity. It's really one of the places that I believe that an investment in yields a much greater fold in return than many other sectors of our economy. And it's also a sector where we have a competitive advantage and a comparative advantage. Nobody really can produce the arts and culture to compete with us. That is what we are producing. What we are producing is so unique that there is no competition for it practically in the world. So I think that, if you look at the contribution, whether it's in music, whether it's in the sculptures and so on, our people here are some of the best in the world. And so I agree with you, and I think that we should focus on this. And you are seeing, actually, a renewed focus on arts and culture by this government. Cybersecurity is so important. As we move into this technological age, cybersecurity becomes more and more important. And this is why we are really enhancing our cyber security institutions, such as NITA. is seeing major investment there. You are seeing that we are making sure that they are meeting the ISO certifications that are required in the area of cybersecurity. You always have to keep one step ahead as far as cybersecurity is concerned. We are doing the national ID, we are doing the digital address system, interoperability, e-visa, passports, and so on. All of these require that we are up with security. And I think that is very, very important, and we are very much committed to that. The mechanism to repair failed policies, resources being controlled by multinationals. This is essentially the president's view, that we want a Ghana that is beyond aid, a Ghana where our resources are controlled by us and not by other people. And this is basically the building of that capacity that we talk about, whether it's in education, whether it's in making sure we can add value to the raw materials, making sure our farmers can produce to the optimal capacity, making sure we have the type of infrastructure that is going to make us productive. All of these give us control. But if you are not educated, if you don't have the productive capacity, then you become dependent. And so we are moving in that direction to become very, very self-dependent as far as our economy is concerned. There was also comments by Sam Brubatla, which I agree with, which basically saying that fundamentally he sees that we should focus on infrastructure and building our infrastructure capacity. You cannot ignore infrastructure in the growth process or building a strong economy. Is very, very key. I mean, we are going to be rolling out a Marshall Plan for agriculture, but infrastructure in terms of the road network is very, very key. I mean, if you look around the country, there are many roads that are very key for agriculture. That if you want to focus on agriculture, there are some key roads in the country that you need to open up. The Afram Place, for example, or go into the Yagabakobori area, for example, or in the central region here, you look at some of the roads that need to be done. So infrastructure, roads, electricity, water, and so on become very, very important, which is essentially what you are saying. We also have Professor Samuel Enim also making comments on, do we know what our scale of preference are? Our scale of preference was put to the electorate, and the electorate voted for us, and that is the scale of preference. It is very clear. The electorate said we want free SHS, and we are giving the electorate free SHS. So it's a very clear matter. It's not rocket science, and the concern that would people take what government is saying is a very important concern. But that is exactly why we are saying that historically people have grown cynical of government, and this is why people have been excluded. But our policy is to include people so that governments can be listened to, so that when you say, I'm going to do this, the people will believe you because they are also now part of the process. So when you are doing one district, one factory, or one village, one dam, or Zongo Development Fund, or free SHS, you are including a whole lot of people. And that becomes very key as far as your the participatory approach is concerned, and so people are likely to listen to you. Last election, when we said we will do free SHS, people said it was not true, and we have done it, and we are going to do more. So next time we say we are going to do something, they will listen better this time because they will know we are a serious government. So I think that it's very, very important that we put everything in context. The statistics are there, and we can always discuss them.
But you cannot ignore the importance of education in building productive capacity. And it's important that we all get together and put our shoulders to the wheel and deliver that for our people. Thank you. So we'll take the next set of questions.
Mr. Vice President, when you were talking, you spoke about you didn't mention actually about Africa's unity, but I'm here to ask something about it. Just like our first president, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he was in for the unity of Africa. And Muammar Gaddafi of Libya also had the same vision. And in his vision, he was talking about a unified economy. He was talking about a common currency, a common military, and a common passport for all Africans. And I want to know, what is your aim, what is your plan towards this vision of his? Do you have the same plans towards Africa's unity in terms of unifying Africa, getting us a common currency, or what are your plans for us? And with the issue of productive capacity, you spoke about we empowering our people, we getting them the wisdom and other things so that they can also work towards development. And now I want to know what your plans are towards helping the man that was involved in making vehicles, that's Safo Kantanka. What are your plans to support him? Because I don't see any plans towards helping him. And I want to know how your plans are towards helping him. Thank you.
My question is focused on the educational sector. What is the presidency and the government of the day doing about our syllabus, especially the senior high school, which is based on more complex variables and scientific postulates that are archaic, and that does not help us to become more eventful, like the citation you have made, the Bill Gates and whatsoever, so that we will be more practical currently than what we used to study back at school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. Yes, you made a nice presentation and you made specific references to some countries. You spoke about Mauritius, that is dependent on three little resources: sugarcane, textiles, and tourism. Now, Ghana is blessed with a lot of development minerals. In your view, what are some specific strategies that we as a nation could pay attention to in order to developing this development minerals? Thank you.
Please, you mentioned about the education. And if we are having education, it has to be efficient. If you give us free as teachers and it's not efficient, then there's no need of that education. So I'm asking, I'll give a practical example. UCC, for instance. An academic institution, you go to yesterday, for instance, I went to the main library, and then the Wi-Fi wasn't working. And how do we promote education, or how do we promote education when the Institute of Higher Education are not providing us with access to internet? How do we work? And then I saw one senior member coming to do something, and because there was no Wi-Fi, he couldn't do what he wanted to do. So then productivity is lessened. And then with that same thing, our lecture theaters. Yes, as students, if we go to lecture theaters and the place is very hot, the minds get very hot, and we are not able to absorb as much as we are supposed to do. So we spend our money on, I would say we spend our money on other stuff. But then if we are building the education capacity of the people, and then they are studying in hot conditions, how are they able to absorb what you are telling them? And sir, please, I have a challenge that I'm throwing to you. Nkrumah started something. When Nkrumah was in power, one of my lecturers told me that he compensated the townsfolk. He compensated them, but he couldn't relocate them to another place. So they are still on the UCC campus. Okay. And talking about foresight, if an educational institution or if a government is looking at the foresight or have foresight, then you should know that definitely the population is increasing. So people will come to the university more. And then if we have these people staying here, if we try building infrastructure, and then we have these people here, we don't get the land to do that. So it's a challenge that I'm throwing to you, that as the leader, and the leader that we trust, you have to do something about that. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the topic which you gave a lecture on is developing stronger economies for the African continent, and in our case, for Ghana. In fact, I was so happy when you were enumerating some plans you have in place in seeing the development of this nation. I don't want to say promises, because now in the mind of the Ghanaian, a promise from a politician is a lie. So I don't want to say promise. The plans you are making to uplift us. And looking at this, the fundamental point or basis for this, our unemployment, is corruption. Taking what is not yours. And when we mention corruption, it is found among you, the politicians, not us, the masses. And I cannot understand why someone whom a nation has been entrusted to take care of, you take money that is not yours. I can't understand it. I can't. And it is making us suffer. Look at our roads. Look at our roads now. All roads are potholes, feeder roads, dirty. We cannot control them. Please, my question now is, why is it that politicians take money that has been given to them to control the country, they take it as their own, and then punish the populace? That's my question. And the second one has to do with tourism. I don't know what the government is doing to uplift our tourist size, various tourist size we have in the nation, to also boost our GDP in a way. And I think if you look at that one too, it will help a lot. But my main question, corruption. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Another great set of questions. The first one related to African unity, and I think the whole issue of economic integration. This has been an issue that we have been grappling with as a continent since independence in many countries. We've been looking at the ECOWAS, the ECA side, and the eastern side have been having theirs. The Central African countries have been having their own community. Today we are talking about a intercontinental trade agreement and so on. Fundamentally, if you look at Africa, it's very, very clear. The case for economic integration is so fundamental. And it has been made so many times. In my opinion, what is lacking amongst African leaders is the political will to push this integration project forward. You have seen since we've been in office, for example, we announced in May that from September 1, all internal customs barriers will be removed in Ghana. In fact, all internal customs barriers have now been removed across the country. You will not see any more internal, because we want to allow for free flow of goods between our countries and other countries within the West African sub-regions. But I am as the president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, is very, very Pan-Africanist in his outlook. He's very, very committed to the continental project. He's visited virtually, most African leaders this year since he came into office, and making the case that we have to move this integration project forward. So it is very important, because if we open up our markets, it also enhances our productive capacity, because people will be able to access larger markets on the continent. So we are very, very supportive of that. The whole issue of the syllabus for free SHS, how do we make, for senior high schools, how do we make it more practical? This is a subject matter that the Ministry of Education is looking at. The Deputy Minister for Education is here. We have to review this syllabus. We have to ask ourselves, how relevant is it to where we are trying to get to? And that exercise is being undertaken by the Ministry of Education, or going to be undertaken. This is something that we are looking at. There's a question on specific strategies to develop our minerals. I think one of the points, and I think behind that question, is this sense that we have all these minerals, but somehow we don't seem to benefit from these minerals as a country. Other people seem to benefit more from the minerals than we do. And this is why we have decided that in the specific case of bauxite, we have to take control of our bauxite and develop an integrated aluminum industry. The law is currently being drafted. We are setting up a bauxite authority which will vest all our bauxite reserves in that authority. We have the mines, we have the smelter in Valco. What we are missing is the refinery, the aluminum refinery. And this is what we are going to put in place, so that the entire value chain of the aluminum industry production will be controlled in Ghana here. If you look at our bauxite, you see that on the table, we have about 700 to 900 million metric tons of bauxite. If we just mine that bauxite alone, the total value is around $50 billion. But if, in fact, we add value to that bauxite through the refining and smeltering, the total value is $460 billion. So when you look at those numbers, it is very clear that bauxite alone is much more than all the oil, cocoa, and gold put together. And we have not focused on it. And this is why we are putting together this bauxite authority. We will get the refinery done, and it will be transformational for Ghana. For the first time, we will take control of our bauxite. There was a question about how efficient our education system is. People don't get access to Wi-Fi. Even in my office, sometimes I don't get access to Wi-Fi. But we believe that actually it's very important to have Wi-Fi access, given the type of education system we are trying to build, both at the senior secondary school and at the tertiary level. We've promised on that matter, and it's very, very important that it is delivered. It is very, very important. Wi-Fi cannot, as for the heat in the classrooms, I can only sympathize with you. Otherwise, I'll have to tell Nana that we will have to do one classroom, one air conditioner. So we'll have to look at that. I'm not sure he'll be too pleased to hear that. But the whole question of corruption, he said, the gentleman really is so passionate and emotional about it, because it's so hurtful that the nation's resources that we have got the privilege to actually manage are stolen for personal benefit. That is very, very hurtful, because if you go and say you're buying a computer, and a computer you could buy for $1,000, you go and connive with somebody to price it at $6,000. So instead of buying one computer, you could have bought 6 computers. So you have essentially, through your corruption, taken away productivity. Medicines in hospitals that could have been bought, built, roads that could have been built. It's a very, very difficult matter. So we are doing a number of things. And even yesterday at the meeting of the economic management team, we said, no, let us put some caps as far as procurement is concerned. Why should somebody go and acquire a computer for $6,000 when we all know on the market you can get it for much less? Let's give the specs and let us at least put in some caps so that you know you cannot exceed this. And therefore we can save the public purse a lot of money. The special prosecutor is coming on corruption. And I think the law, the parliamentarians who are here, we expect the law to be passed. But even without that law, we are going to have to send some very strong messages that this will not be tolerated. It's very, very important. And I'm sure that in due course, everything will be clear. But I think it's a very important question, and we should keep harping on it and harping on it. It's very important. Let's harp on it, but more importantly, let's deal with it. Tourism is clearly one of the areas also in Ghana. A few weeks ago, I was in Axim, and it was just amazing. I went around, saw some very, very beautiful tourist sites, and we don't sell enough what we have, the natural beauty of this country. But we have a very effective minister of tourism who is making a lot of inroads, trying to get developments in various areas. Even when we did the national address system, her first comment do we have the tourist sites across depicted clearly on this national address system? So we are going to definitely invest in tourism, because it's one area that can really increase productive capacity of this country. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your questions. It's been very, very fruitful. I'm most grateful. And
thank you very much, Your Excellency. We'll now take the chairman's closing remarks.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we're coming to the end of our lecture today. I don't want to summarize what has happened today. I want to give some reflections by way of remarks and bring this session to a close. His Excellency has dwelt on focusing on one missing link out of the many missing links that he enumerated. And that missing link is about building the productive capacity of nations, and in that case, building the productive capacity of Ghana, our motherland. And this, for his case, a serious missing link that we need to address. And of course, stronger productive capacity means stronger economies, which simply means that we must add value to whatever that we have. If we just export raw materials, it doesn't lead us anywhere. We can't build productive capacity. Just and of course, productive capacity and stronger economy also means that we do not have to depend on just natural resources. I think we need to hear some songs about what we have. It's all about we have to pull coffee, it's all about what we have. It's not about what we do. It's about what we have. Many of them are just extractive. And yet, we as a nation, we have to go. We don't know how to extract it. We are oil. We don't know how we can get it out of the sea or out of the soil. We have bauxite. We have all the minerals. Getting it out is the problem. Adding something to that to make it more economical and therefore attract higher income class is also a problem. And that also tells us we must develop and grow in certain areas. He mentioned skills, knowledge, and technology. And I was also happy that he mentioned the free SHS. The free SHS is an excellent idea because if we are going to have skills, knowledge, and technology, indeed, we need to move up. We need to get more children educated at higher levels. Gone were the days when the IMF and World Bank told us that university education was not very important and that we should concentrate on primary education. But we have seen that university education is important. Higher education is important. And therefore, those free SHS is an excellent idea which will help us to get more people educated at the higher level. But I must also say that, Your Excellency, in expanding the senior high school level, we also then need to think about the university. Because from senior high school, they need to go to the university. And therefore, we need to look at the infrastructure at the universities now. We need to look at the faculty now and increase and improve upon the faculties in the universities. And then also the facilities, so that come the next 3 years, the universities will then be ready to take on these people and to improve their skills, knowledge, and technology. I think that we're all happy when the lady mentioned the fact that the internet wasn't working at the library. If we really want to use technology, the internet must work. And therefore, we are trying as much as possible as a university to improve upon our internet. But it also means that as students, we need to pay more. Yes. And I know that the year is going to come. Yes, as at now, students only pay 69 cedis towards internet. When the sister university close by, students pay 450 cedis. Even increasing it from 69 to 79 was resisted by students. So when you resist it like that, I don't know how we can then give you better services. So definitely, we will have improvement within the semester, but it will call for us to contribute more towards internet so that we can use technology to help us. And I believe that if we do, then we improve our skills, we increase our knowledge, and we use technology. This will help us when we go out to be able to function and to get us to move away from where Mauritius has moved away from sugar, tourism, and textiles into agriculture, manufacturing, financing, ICT, real estate, and hospitality. I think that we can get there. And therefore, if we all put our heads together, and you as students also study hard, and we as lecturers also lecture very well, then together we will build a stronger economy. We thank you very much for your patience. And for this well-attended lecture. And I want to congratulate all of you for coming. You have done very, very well. Clap a lot more for yourself. Before we go, His Excellency is here, and we are happy that he's been able to make it to this function, and that we have listened to very captivating and innovative way of making a presentation to us with facts and figures. And we as a university, we are most grateful to Your Excellency. And we would like to give you a token. And that token, we want to make it public. And I'll call upon the immediate past Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Didi Kukoli. He also started this advancement lecture series, and we have come to continue. So, Your Excellency, please come.